today, as we wave goodbye to this series, we also say goodbye to the mellowest setup music we have ever had in the history of this church. Today we land our summer series, Dinners with Jesus, and before we launch into our final part, can you do something with me? Can you just show your appreciation for Pastor Aaron Buer for opening the scriptures for us the last several weeks? I'm genuinely grateful for the way that Aaron leads our youth ministry, Lifeline, middle school and high school, and also the way he brings his full self to us weekend after weekend on those weekends when he's preaching. So grateful for Aaron. And next weekend, we start a brief 4-part series, which will take us up to Labor Day. And on the other side of Labor Day, we will start our epic fall series called Strength for the Journey that we were filming for over in Greece back in May. And so that's coming post-Labor Day. But 4-part series begins next week. Let me tell you about it real quick. It's just called The Power of Words. The Power of Words, words and why they matter. We're going to come toward the end of summer. For many of us, the school year will be beginning. For many of us, the pace will start to pick up a little bit, and this is just a refresher course, a tune-up in our words, in our speech, the power of words, words and why they matter. So join us next week as we begin that brief series together. Now, I'm in the habit of taking the month of July off of speaking, but not taking the month off for preparing. And so what July does for me is it allows me to look into the fall and the winter and begin to prepare for the material that's out there. But it also gives the opportunity to just hang out, relax, enjoy some time with family, kids, grandkids. And so I have a question for you in the summer. Did any of you spend any time at a lake? Show of hands. You visited a lake at least once, all right? For some of you, it was the lake, Lake Michigan, the shoreline. For some of you, an inland lake up north. For some of you, something in the area. I mean, Reed's Lake, Green Lake, Murray Lake. A couple weeks ago, Chris and I were with friends at their place up north, and we were here. That literally is a picture of their dock, and it's Lake Ann. Any know Lake Ann? It's up north, not far from Traverse City, right? Yes. Applaud Lake Ann. There we go. She appreciates the honor. So there's just something about a lake that is life-giving. There's something about a lake that's restorative. And our story today, the setting is a meal, a breakfast on the beach that occurs beside a lake. And it's not that lake, it's that lake. We call it the Sea of Galilee, but calling it a sea is an exaggeration. The Sea of Galilee is an inland lake in northern Israel, and just for perspective on size, it's about 33 miles around, 33 miles in circumference. So you could walk around it in a couple days. And our story occurs right there, a meal around a campfire beside the lake. That's where it happens. I think it's also important to know when it happens. This story with Jesus and his disciples and this campfire meal beside a lake happens after the resurrection. That is, if you look at the ministry of Jesus, there's like 3 years where he's walking around with his disciples, training them, performing miracles, teaching. And then after 3 years of training, there's the horrible, awful, terrible, life-giving crucifixion. And if you've ever attended an Easter service, Easter is that holiday that celebrates life after death, Jesus coming back to life, the resurrection after the crucifixion. And if you've been to an Easter service, there's often there's also the picture of an empty tomb, and it's kind of like his body isn't there, and you go, okay, that's the resurrection. Did you know that there were conversations that Jesus had with his disciples after the resurrection? A time where they hung out together after the resurrection. This meal by the Sea of Galilee is one of those. Now, there's a technical term for this. These are called the post-resurrection appearances of Christ. Post-resurrection appearances of Christ. Okay, who cares? the conversation that takes place around the campfire in this meal, understanding the timing later in the message when we get to this meal, understanding when it occurs is critical to the conversation that transpires there. But for now, I just need to thank you for being here today, being here this morning, for joining into this final part of Dinner with Jesus. It is my deep hope from our conversation today that some of you, for the very first time, will come to know, will come to experience Jesus as friend. That some of you, for the first time, would begin to glimpse Jesus as friend, and to glimpse him as Jesus' friend, not when things are cleaned up, but even while things are a little messed up. To experience Jesus' friend not because you've been at your best. To experience Jesus' friend even when things have been at their worst. So the story, this meal beside the Sea of Galilee, it unfolds in 3 parts today, and part number 1 is breakfast with Jesus. Part number 1, breakfast with Jesus. John chapter 21, verse 1, this is how it begins. Afterward, Jesus what? Appeared. This is one of the post-Easter, post-resurrection appearances of Jesus. He appeared again to his disciples, and where? By the Sea of Galilee, in the lake, and it happened this way. Jesus is nowhere around. Peter and 6 other disciples, followers of Jesus, are up north. There's Peter, there's Thomas, there's Nathaniel, there's brothers, the sons of Zebedee, James and John, and there's 2 other disciples whose names are not given, 7 of them. And Peter goes, I'm going fishing. I'm going fishing. This was not his hobby. This had been his career. This had been his vocation, raised on the Sea of Galilee in a fishing family. And the other 6 disciples are there, go, hey, we're going with you. And they're not fishing with a pole, but fishing with nets, and not fishing with nets from shore this time, but fishing with nets out in a boat in the water at night. You let the net out, you pull it back in. You let the net out, you pull it back in. Nothing. You let the net out, you pull it back in. Nothing. All night long, they get skunked. They didn't catch a thing. Dawn. The sun is rising. And about 100 yards away, there's this guy on shore, and he yells out to the boat, "Did you catch anything?" And they responded back with one word, "No." And he yells, "Throw the nets on the other side of the boat." These guys were raised on this lake. They were not novices. They pull in the net, they drop it on the other side of the boat, and the boat lurches. The boat lunges. It's like every fish on that side of the lake seeks the net. A net-breaking catch. And John, one of the disciples, he looks at Peter and goes, "It's him." And splash. Peter grabs his clothes, and over the side he goes, and he's dog paddling to shore. The rest of the disciples, they row in toward shore, dragging this bumper crop of fish they just caught. And when they arrive on the shore, in the early morning light, this is what they find. They find a fire of hot coals with fish baking over the hot coals and bread baking over the hot coals. Jesus on the shore has started a campfire and is cooking breakfast for them. Check it out with me, John 21:9. It says, when they landed, they saw a fire burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. And then Jesus says, hey, go to your nets, grab some of your fish, bring some of your fish too. We'll put them on for breakfast as well. Peter runs over, he jumps in the boat, they pull the net up on shore, and they're counting. It's like 153 fish that they catch, and they bring some of their fish. Then we read these words in verse 12. It says, Jesus said to them, 4 words, what? Jesus said to them what? Ready? Come and have breakfast. Some of you that memorize the words of Jesus, remember that one. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. Jesus said, Love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus said, and then look what's next. Jesus came, took the bread, gave it to them, and he did the same with the fish. Jesus picks the bread out of the coals, hands it to them, hands fish to them. He's made breakfast for his friends. Is there not something about this story that touches you? It's multi-sensory. Feel the warmth of the coals. Hear the sizzle of the fish. Smell the aroma of baking fish and baking bread. Taste the meal that Christ has prepared. I'm just telling you, there is something about this scene that seizes me, that captures me at a deep, deep level. Some of it may be, I confess, that I am obsessed with fire. It's pathetic. We're not just talking here about a little summer campfire and toasted marshmallows to make s'mores. Oh, no. It's so much worse than that. 2 years ago, Christmas Day, 12 inches of snow. That's my backyard. With my 2 sons and my son-in-law. I didn't take that picture because that was weird. I took that picture because it was normal. You say, dude, why can't you sit inside and open presents with your family like normal families do? Oh, we do that as well, by the fire. Last week, we were preparing to take a couple of our grandkids for a little bit one day, and Chris goes, hey, what if we take them to a park, and we have a picnic lunch at a park? I said, that's awesome. Why don't I bring a little camp stove and a little propane thing, and I can make macaroni and cheese? And she's looking at me like, can't we just have a picnic? And I'm looking back like, yeah, but why would you want to when there could be flames? And now, with this story, a beautiful thing has happened. Jesus is on my side. Years back, people would wear those little bracelets with the initials on them. You remember those? Remember those? WJD, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? I'll tell you what Jesus would do. Jesus would start a fire and cook stuff on it. That's what Jesus would do. And I know that right now in this very room and those watching, there are dudes going like, Pastor Manion, I now believe in Jesus. I now believe in Jesus. I'm just kidding, but just a little. Now, listen, don't reduce Jesus to this story, but include this story in your mental image of Jesus. Don't reduce Jesus to this story. I believe in Jesus. I believe in breakfast Jesus. I believe in campfire Jesus. Don't reduce him to this, but please include this. The Jesus who cooked breakfast for his friends. Include this in your mental image of Jesus. So what did Jesus do? Well, he healed. And that's true. Jesus was deeply disturbed by broken bodies and broken minds. And often healed people. Jesus healed. What else? Well, he taught. That was his title, rabbi or teacher. Jesus was a teacher. Correct. He taught. He healed and he taught. Anything else? Yeah, he died. I mean, one of the most dominant images of Jesus is Jesus hanging on a cross. And when he died, Jeff, he was paying off debts that weren't his. He was paying off debts that were mine and debts that are yours. He died for us, yeah. Anything else? Yes, he enjoyed meals with his friends. As Jesus begins to collect followers, disciples, one of the very first stories we get, it is the first recorded miracle of Jesus. He turns water into wine at a wedding feast where he's eating in a village at a festive event with some of his early disciples. One of the last stories we get of Jesus is the Last Supper, where Jesus, again, is having a critical, pivotal conversation with his disciples hours before he gets arrested, the night before he is crucified. And between these 2 points, the wedding feast and the Last Supper, there's meal after meal after meal after meal. So just understand that Jesus is multifaceted, multidimensional. Jesus as healer, Jesus as teacher, Jesus as savior, and Jesus as friend. Jesus as friend who dined with people. I long for you to experience Jesus as friend. Not just some image of a crucifix, and yeah, he died for us, but to experience Jesus also as the one who said, come and have breakfast. I long for you to experience Jesus as friend and to know that there's room at the table for you. And even as I express those words, I just know that there are more than a few people just going like, yeah, dude, you don't know me. I mean, look around the campfire. Those are the apostles. They were welcome. I mean, later we would not call them John, James, Peter, Thomas, but Saint John, Saint James, Saint Peter, Saint Thomas. In religious art, we paint them with halos. I understand why they were invited around the campfire. Jeff, I ain't no saint. You don't know me. They belong there. I don't belong there. And this is why it's important to recall when this meal occurred. This meal occurred, what do we call it? A post resurrection. This is after Easter, after the resurrection, which means it's after the crucifixion, which means it is after the arrest and trial of Jesus, which was really, really fresh. Look around the campfire. Nathaniel, Thomas, a couple other guys that aren't named, Peter, the dude with the sopping wet clothes. Did Peter do anything at the arrest and trial of Jesus that you might consider a bit unsaintly? I don't think they had talked about it yet. And as they're wrapping up breakfast together, Jesus looks at Peter and he goes, we need to talk about something that happened. Oh man, here it comes. Part number 2 of the story. A fireside chat. Leaving the Last Supper and going to the Garden of Gethsemane where Jesus is going to be arrested, Jesus breaks the news to his disciples and says, all you guys are going to bail on me tonight. You're going to run. As the scripture says, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep. They're going to scatter. And you guys are going to scatter. You're going to run. Peter steps forward and says, over my dead body, they'll run. I'll never run. I mean, check out his confidence in Matthew chapter 26, verse 33. Peter replied, even if all of these guys fall away on account of you, I never will. I'm more dedicated than they are. I'm more devoted than they are. I'm more committed than they are. I love you more than they love you. That will never happen. And a few hours later, we find Jesus. As Jesus is being interrogated, Peter is in a courtyard, and now he's sitting around a different fire. Now, the setup of Jesus' interrogation during the night, Peter is in the courtyard, and the room in which Jesus is being interrogated is open to the courtyard, which means that Peter can not only hear what's happening in there, he can also see what's happening in there. And Jesus is outnumbered, and he is getting ganged up on, and his words are being twisted, and lies are told about him, and it is not going well. And Jesus just stands there, and he's not defending himself, and Peter is getting very, very scared. And in that moment where Peter said, even if everybody bails on you, I never will, Jesus said, hate to break the news to you, but before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will disown even knowing me like 3 times. Peter goes, yeah, like that's going to happen. And when some there had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat down with them. Now a servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him And she said, this man was with him. Peter denied it. Woman, I don't know him. A little later, someone else saw him and said, you also, you're one of them. Man, I am not. Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted, hey, listen to his accent. Certainly this man was with him, for he is a Galilean. Peter replied, man, I don't know what you're talking about. Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. Listen to this. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. From the interrogation room into the courtyard, eye contact. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly. He goes out and he breaks down and he just cries like a baby. Breakfast on the beach. This was not ancient history. This had happened days or maybe a couple weeks beforehand. There are 4 accounts of the ministry of Jesus in your Bible. These accounts are given by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Do you know which one of those described Peter disowning Jesus at the trial? Do you know which one of those describes Peter's denying that he knows Jesus? All of them. Man, this isn't just failure. This is public failure. This is well-documented failure. And there they are, sitting around the fire, and they've just eaten the bread, and they've just eaten the fish. And Jesus looks at Peter, and he goes, there's a little something we need to talk about. Oh boy, here it comes. The fireside chat. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you really love me more than they love me? Mister, I am more committed, I am more dedicated, I am more devoted. Everybody bails, I never will bail. Do you love me more than these? Do you love me more than they love me? And by the way, Jesus used his formal name, Simon, son of John. This is not a casual term. It's as if Jesus looked at me and said, Jeffrey Wayne Manion, I have a question. Do you love me? And Peter, he responds, he goes, he just says, yes. He says, man, you know that I love you. And Jesus says this, Jesus said, feed my lambs. Do you love me? You know that I do, feed my lambs. I'm glad that conversation's out of the way. We're just getting revved up. Round 2. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter answers again. He answered, yes, Lord. You know I do. You know that I love you. Round 3. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. Now, round 3. The 3rd time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter's like, this is killing me. I mean, John, a guy sitting at the campfire who narrates the story, he writes this, Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a 3rd time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus responds with this. Jesus said, feed my sheep. This is uncomfortable to read. Why does Jesus take him through this? Question number 1, do you love me? Question number 2, do you love me? Question number 3, do you love me? I suspect that because Peter had disowned Jesus 3 times, Jesus gives him 3 opportunities to re-own him. I think because the disowning I don't know him. I don't know him. I don't know him. Jesus gives him 3 opportunities to recommit, to restate his devotion. See, what happens in Breakfast Beside the Beach, I don't think Jesus is asking this to shame Peter. I think he's asking this 3 times in order to restore Peter. But Peter is coming off one of his darkest, most embarrassing, most disappointing things in his life. If you ask Peter, was there ever a time in your life you wish you had a do-over? Oh, it would be that night in the courtyard. Can I ask you something? Any event, decision, or season in your life where you wish you had a do-over? We just walked around the room and people openly, honestly said what they were thinking. You'd hear someone say, oh yeah, my do-over, 9th grade. She was socially awkward and we made her life miserable. We were mean, I was mean. And we thought it was funny. And I look back and I'm just embarrassed by who we were and what we did. Yeah, do-over? Yeah. See, here's the deal. Some of us are overdue for a fireside chat. Have you ever talked to your Lord about that regret? You should walk around the room and ask people what their era, decision, or moment would be. They say, yeah, I wish I had a do-over. Some people say, oh my, the money we wasted, squandered. We burned through cash like there was no tomorrow. And then one day, tomorrow came knocking on our door. And there's this insatiable appetite to cram our lives with stuff and with trips. Yeah, do-over? Yeah, I wish we had a do-over on that whole season in our lives. What if you're overdue for a fireside chat? You just walk around the room and listen to the confessions, and you would hear more than one person say, I was bored and disappointed in my marriage. And I found it didn't take long on Facebook at all to find other people that were bored and disappointed with where they were and who they were with. It's a mess, it's a mess, it's a mess, and I don't even know how to begin to clean it up. I just wonder, anybody here overdue for a fireside chat? What is that decision, era, time, season when you just wish you had a do-over? That convention, that spring break, that abortion clinic, that season of living a double life, those months or years where you checked out emotionally. Some of us are overdue for a fireside chat. And I know, Jeff, you're not supposed to live in the past. You know, we're not supposed to live in the past, but sometimes we need to visit the past in order to experience freedom in the present, and in order to move effectively into the future. Well, I believe God is a forgiving God. I believe that God is a forgiving God, but relationally speaking, sometimes for a relationship to get mended, for forgiveness to be transacted, listen, let's just understand, sometimes there's a conversation, right? A conversation is, I blew it, I'm sorry. And someone else says, yeah, I forgive you. What if we have lack of freedom in the present and we can't move into the future effectively because we have never looked up and said, I know you know, I need you to know that I know. And I've been silent for way too long. And I know, that's why you came and gave your life to cover stuff like that. But I've been quiet, and I think we need to talk. What if in response you hear your Lord whisper, come and have breakfast? What if rather than hearing the voice say, you have not done enough and you need to grow more and you are not enough, what if you hear a voice say, come and have breakfast? What if you have the opportunity to feel the warmth of the coals and to smell the aroma of the baking bread and the fish and to be nourished by his hand? What if you have the opportunity to experience Jesus as friend who says, let's talk about what happened and let's talk about how to move. Let's talk about how to move on from this. So Jeff, that's what it means to be forgiven. It's way better than that. Peter doesn't simply get restored. In this beachside breakfast, Peter gets recommissioned. He gets an assignment. It's not just about being restored, it's about being reassigned. And so conversation number 3, we just call it a critical assignment. Now, when Jesus asked Peter 3 times, do you love me, do you love me, do you love me? And Peter said, you know that I do, you know that I do, you know that I do. There's an image that Jesus uses that deals with animal husbandry. What is the image? Jesus said, okay, feed my, what did he say? This is the image that Jesus draws upon, a shepherd and sheep. This is not what you would expect to find in this beachside breakfast conversation. You would expect Jesus to say, Peter, do you love me? And Peter says, you know that I love you. And Jesus says, okay, I forgive you. Second time, do you love me? You know that I love you. Okay, I forgive you. Third time, do you love me? Oh, this is killing me. You know that I love you. Okay, I forgive you. And that's not what Jesus says. Jesus' final line in each of these conversations has to do with this right here. Feed my lambs, take care of my sheep, feed my sheep. This is huge because Peter is not simply restored. He is given a critical responsibility. He is given a critical assignment. Feed my lambs, take care of my sheep, feed my sheep. I just want you to notice the pronoun my. Feed my lambs, take care of my sheep, feed my sheep. Peter, do you love me? Yes, then take care of my kids. What if we demonstrate our love for Jesus through nurturing and nourishing other people in our spiritual community? Hear his voice, feed my sheep, feed my lambs, take care of my sheep. There's some good reminders in this. I mean, I was reading this again last week, and I was reminded once again, this isn't my church. This isn't my church. As much as someone go, my people, these are Christ's people that I have the privilege of nurturing and nourishing. Here are the words of Christ. If you love me, feed my sheep. This is so critical because there are some times when you will be nudged to love and serve someone that, quite frankly, doesn't mean a lot to you. Maybe you barely know them. Jesus here says, no. Don't love and serve and nurture and nourish them because they matter to you. Love and nurture and serve them because they matter to me. Hear those words. Feed my sheep, feed my sheep, feed my sheep. The day will come when you exit a service and you end up in an atrium and, there's someone you know, it's a casual acquaintance, and it is only a couple sentences before you discern that they are hiking some very hard miles. And quite frankly, you don't know exactly what to say in order to give some words of encouragement and hope, but do hear the whisper in your ear, feed my sheep. Right now, nourish, nurture. Jesus seems to have left us with a responsibility. with the critical assignment of caring for each other. It will only be a matter of time before you bump into someone in your church community who is in a season of suffocating grief or who has had their heart broken. And you just need to hear the whisper, feed my sheep, nurture and nourish my other kids. This is a critical assignment. Dozens of you serve in our children's ministry that we hold on the weekend services at Discovery Village. As you work with a group of four-year-olds or fourth graders, just remember those words as you walk into the classroom. Feed my lambs. Take care of my lambs. I don't know some of them. Well, they don't have to matter to you. They matter to Christ. And in time, they will matter to you. Those of you that serve our middle schoolers and our high schoolers in our Lifeline ministry, remember that when you show up one evening and you're tired. Feed my lambs, feed my sheep. This is the group that I chose my term carefully, that you shepherd. Small group leaders in our women's ministry, Thrive, or our men's ministry. Yeah, that's my group of women, that's my group of guys. They're Christ's group of guys, Christ's group of women. We're feeding, nurturing, and nourishing his sheep. Feed my sheep, feed my sheep, feed my sheep. Here, it should be echoing in our minds. See, the beauty of breakfast beside the beach is not simply that Peter gets restored, it's that Peter gets reassigned. He receives a critical assignment. Peter, do you love me? Yes, I love you. If you love me, then take care of them. Feed my sheep. So that's what we have to do? No. That's what we get to do. Peter ages. It happens. The Jesus community begins in Jerusalem. Persecution strikes. They scatter. Now, instead of this big Jesus community in Jerusalem, these little Jesus communities all over the place. And Peter writes to them to give them encouragement in how to stay faithful and following Christ, even in intense persecution. His first letter is called 1 Peter. This is written by the guy in soaking clothes who sat beside the fire ring that day. And he writes to those who have assumed the mantle of spiritual leadership, and you'll never believe what imagery Peter uses to encourage them. The imagery of a shepherd with flock. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 2. The disciple of Christ writes this, be shepherds of God's flock that are under your care. God's flock, your care. Watching over them like a shepherd watches over a group of sheep, a flock of sheep. And then he says this, not because you, help me here, not because you must, but because you are willing. No. What he turns to there is not simply the activity, he turns to the motivation, the attitude of serving. Not because you must, but because you are willing. Here, my friends, is the challenge to see ourselves move from have to get to. From have to get to. Remember that. Remember that with your tired. Remember that I get to offer comfort at a nursing home. I get to. Remember that. I get to walk beside an insecure 14-year-old who feels all alone and friendless. I get to. I get to walk beside a 25-year-old trapped in a pornographic addiction and they have no idea how to break out of this and are afraid of exposure and telling anybody else about it. I get to walk beside that person. I get to spend a long, confusing evening with a couple when a bomb has detonated in their marriage. And this will not be the last long, confusing evening I spend. I get to spend time with a small group of people when nothing much is going wrong. Because it's what we do. It's what we do when nothing much is going wrong that prepares the heart for the day when everything is going wrong. I get to. That's the beauty of this breakfast conversation with Jesus. It's not just about getting restored. It's about getting assigned. Pull the boat up to shore and feel the warmth of the coals. Experience the aroma of the bread and the fish. Taste the meal that your Lord has prepared for you. Experience Jesus. Experience Jesus as friend. I'm going to ask our musicians to come out here and also at each of our campuses, and they're going to play a song for us to listen to, perform a song as we prepare to close the service today. But as they're coming out, I need you to do something. I need you to find that little piece of paper that is somewhere near your chair and that little miniature golf pencil, if you can find that. And I would like you to write down about 8 words. You ready? There's room at the table for me. Can I ask you to write that down right now? There's room at the table for me. Keep that in a place where you can find it again. You might need that reminder, not because things are cleaned up, but when you feel messed up. You might need that reminder. There's a place at the table for me. Not when you've been at your best, but when you're embarrassed and feel far from home. Read the sentence with me. Ready? There's a place at the table for me. One more time. There's a place at the table for me. There really is. The message of this series has been, pull up a chair. There's a place at the table for you. Gracious God, we give thanks that we were in each other's company this day and had this privilege of opening your story, being reminded again of Jesus as friend. Guide us, speak to us, nurture us, and feed us. We ask this in the name of Jesus, who came here for us.